Despite being ancient news now, in the grand scheme of automotive news pieces, anyone who knows me knows that there was no way I wasn't going to talk about this. It's a car which is far too important to me, one of my absolute favourite supercar designs, pretty much of the last 20 years, probably one of my favourite supercars ever, to be honest, and of course part of that is my love for turbines. Having the idea of a turbine range extender was really cool, even if its chances of reaching production were low. Just the core design itself, especially being as it was around a similar time to the big three, the Porsche 918, the McLaren P1, and of course the Ferrari, I immediately and ever since have always preferred the Jaguar to those big three. I didn't care if it was slower around a track, slower in a straight line, whatever. It was just a cooler car to me. And I think part of the reason why I've always liked it more is it felt a bit more old school. It felt like it didn't really care about necessarily being the fastest or the best at any particular thing. It was more like the school of thought of a Zonda, which is just make a great supercar, and then if it happens to be good at something, great. But above all else, it's about looking fantastic, sounding fantastic, and being incredible to drive. To me, you can't really fail if you make a supercar like that. Of course, ultimately it didn't really happen, and they made some for Spectre, I believe it was the Bond movie. I think they made about 7 or 8 of them. And Callum Design, of course from Ian Callum, who has, let's just say, plenty of connection to this world of Jaguars and Astons, etc. They recommissioned one of the stunt cars, number 007, into basically a workable street vehicle. If I recall correctly, I think it might have been an orange one. This one is chassis number 1, or 001 as the case is, and they've made it in this stunning kind of autumn colour, I believe they referred to it as, slight hint of yellow, some earthy tones, a mix of light and dark on the interior, and I'm going to put a link to their website because there's so much thought and so much love in particular that's gone into this car, because a huge leg up, I would imagine, from a supercar manufacturing perspective is that it was a ready-made machine. Yes, it was a stunt car, but that's already far ahead in the process than building your own supercar from scratch. And what I like as well is they haven't really gone crazy complicated in terms of power plant. I believe it uses a similar, if not identical, version of the kind of 5-litre supercharged V8 which you'd find in one of the later model XKRs or an F-Type SVR or a Range Rover SVR, which is a superb engine in terms of just how good it sounds, the kind of performance it gives you. It's a brutal sounding, fantastic performance engine, and in this form it's slightly tweaked to over 600 horsepower, up around 570 foot-pounds of torque, of course being mid-engine and I believe rear-wheel drive still, so again quite old school in that regard. It's bound to be quick. No matter what, that's got to be at least a 205, 210 mile an hour car, I would imagine, probably with a 0 to 60 time of, I don't know, maybe 3.5 seconds, 3.6 maybe, somewhere around there. So in other words, a very Carrera GT, Zonda F, that kind of era almost of supercar, which again is why I love it so much. In terms of the rest of it, they put over 1,000 hours into just the bodywork and the paint and the finish. They even gave it actual workable, useful active aero, which deploys and even acts as an air brake as well. As I mentioned, that fully redesigned and fully functional interior instead of the almost race car-esque interior which of course the stunt cars had. And of course a huge thing which the car had to have was to have type approval. So in other words, to allow it on the road, to verify that it's a functional, safe, roadworthy vehicle. Something which, in a similar kind of way, my own project is going to have coming up pretty soon as well, to see what registration it ends up on and how the high roller ends up being in terms of using it on the road. This one though, having the existing architecture of the supercar, the existing aerodynamics, which surely had gotten far enough in the concept stage even to be more than stable enough, at least, so it's not just like they took a crazy stunt car that was undrivable and tried to turn it into something good. It was already a concept before that stage, which must, I imagine, have really helped out through this process. Still, a huge amount of time, a huge amount of cash, and a huge amount of development went into making these cars viable, but I'm so glad that at least in some form we've finally allowed the CX75, and Callum in particular has allowed the CX75 to have its day. It's a car which is about the same kind of limited run as something like a GT by Citroen, which I believe there were only about 8 of those made, so quite similar in that regard. And funnily enough, the Citroen also had a 5-litre V8, I believe a Ford power plant if I recall correctly, so they actually have quite a lot in common, those two cars, and you're probably about as likely to see one of them. Ultimately, I just wanted to touch on it. Of course, massively awesome news for a fan of the CX75 like myself, and I'm sure for many of you as well. And up until now, it was basically just driving it in a few racing games, like Drive Club, for example, but now it's kind of a real thing. Jaguar might not have made it, but it's still a real thing, and that's pretty awesome. That's it though for this news piece. Of course, I'll see you in future with more, and for now, thanks for watching.